Number one, barter was the main means of payment utilized in early economies. Define the term barter, followed by outline one advantage of barter, also state two characteristics of money. So here we go. Barter is the direct exchange of goods and services for other goods and services without the use of money. So that's what bartering is all about. One advantage of this particular, means of transaction is disadvantage, sorry, is double coincidence of wants. And that is the way both parties must want what the other has, which means trade difficulties. Because when it says, let's say someone encounters a neighbor, well, it could be a neighbor, a villager, whoever, and this person wants chicken that is being offered to them, but the person who is offering the chicken wants probably fish. But the person who wants the chicken doesn't have fish, they have lentils. That would not be a double coincidence of wants because one has what the other wants, but the other don't have what one wants. So both of them must want what each of them want to exchange in order for that trade to occur. Hence, it's not or would not have been easy in those days to always locate someone in a short period of time that wants what you have and you want what they have to exchange. Two characteristics of money. One, it's portable. So money is easy to carry around, and also divisibility. So money can be divided into smaller units to allow different values of exchange. Okay, if you have any questions, feel free to ask your questions at any given moment. So I shall continue to this part here. So it says figure one shows a diagram of a check. And on the check, we have Sunshine Commercial Bank, number 007. The date, April 10th, 2025. Paid to the order of ABC Traders, $6,000. We have the check number. We also have the person, the payee, the person who would have signed the check, which is Kimani Clark. Good evening, Jewel. Welcome to you. Right. So it goes on to see the questions that proceed. It says identify the drawer of the check in figure one. Also identify the drawee of the check in this figure. And then to list three instruments of payment other than checks used in modern economies. Okay, so based on the information there, let's see. Good evening, Natalia. Welcome to you. So for those who just joined, I'm going through May, June 2025, past paper 2. Okay, so the drawer is the person who wrote up the check, who signed the check, or in other words, the person who, when the check is presented to the bank, they would their money will come out from their accounts because they are making a payment via check. So in this case, the drawer is this person over here, Kimani Clark. They also said identify the drawee. So the drawee will be the person and or business, because it could be an individual or company that is receiving the check. Just now, hold on, let me make sure I say it correctly. No, no, no. That's not the joy. The payee is the person who's receiving the check. So the payee would be ABC traders, but they did not ask for the payee. They asked for the drawee. Okay, so the drawee would be the bank. Which bank would pay the check on Kimani's behalf? Well, Kimani apparently has a checkbook from Sunshine Commercial Bank. Hence, Sunshine Commercial Bank will be the drawee. So I have the answers below here, right? So once again, the drawer, the person who wrote out the check is Kimani or Kimani Clark. And the drawee would be the bank. Um, who issued or gave out that checkbook. So it is Sunshine Commercial Bank. That is where the money would be coming from exactly. The question again did not ask for payee, but if it did, the payee is the person or company receiving the check. So that would have been ABC Traders. The next question was list three instruments of payment other than checks used in modern economies. So, one of the most popular ones, apart from check and cash, is debit or credit cards, right? Right, so cards, the debit card is normally anyone who has a debit card means they have money in their bank account and they can only use that card to make payments once they have money in the account. A credit card is different in the sense that you don't need to have money on your credit card because a credit card is like a loan card, which means depending on how much a person and businesses have them to qualify for a credit card, they would be able to use that amount of money. So, for instance, if your credit card has $10,000 on it, um, either every 30 or a little bit more days, the person who is the holder of that card, if they use all the money on the card, it's not their money they are using, it's people's money from the bank that the bank lends people via credit card, so they would be required to pay on their due dates. Yeah, so the credit card is normally using other people's money from the bank with a credit card. So it's another name. It's not really a known name, but it can also be known as a loan card. Loans, as in borrowing money via credit card to spend. There's also bank drafts. So a bank draft is normally used for high ticket items. So for instance, if any of you probably one day and you are working and you have your career and things going for you, and you say, okay, I want to get my own vehicle, assuming that you didn't inherit, but if you did inherit, good. But if you didn't and you want your own vehicle, um, you can go to the automotive company. Of course, they will check your salary to ensure that you're qualified. And then whichever bank that automotive company is working with for like bank drafts. So let's say, for instance, they're working with First Citizens Bank, then you have to go to First Citizens Bank and do up the bank draft, and the bank would normally pay in full for the vehicle on your behalf. And then you have to repay the bank a monthly installment, sometimes a deposit, followed by the next 30 days a monthly installment of how much until you pay off for that car. So that's normally what the bank drafts are used for. So it's used for like cars, which is expensive, house or mortgage and stuff. And we also have electronic transfers. So those are known as wire transfer, online banking, mobile money apps. So any application or an app that is known for short, where we can send money or receive money, mainly online and also abroad. Okay. So those would be electronic because they are normally done using an electronic device, such as a phone or laptop or some one of those. Okay. So if you all have any questions, please feel free to ask your question. If no questions, I shall continue. So the next set of questions are differentiate between each of the following pairs of terms. So we have private sector and public sector, private limited companies and public limited companies. So here we go. So of course, differentiate means to tell the difference. The private sector consists of businesses owned and operated by individuals or groups for profits, while the public sector includes businesses and services owned and controlled by the government for the benefits of the public. So, yeah, any business which is owned by any person who is not a part of the government will be considered part of the private sector. And it doesn't matter whether the person is a local or foreigner, as long as they are not a part of the government, it's private sector businesses. And public sector, any business, organization, ministry, whatever it is, operated, owned, controlled by the government would be considered public sector. The next one with private limited companies and public limited companies. Okay, on the one hand, private limited companies, their shares are not sold to the general public. Ownership is restricted to a small group of people, often family or friends. On the other hand, public limited company, their shares are sold to the general public through the stock exchange. So yeah, that is just one difference really. So private limited companies normally would have two for the lease in terms of the minimum number of owners, a maximum of 50 owners, right? Now, they tend to be larger than company, no, I say the wrong thing. Larger than sole traders and partnership and stuff, but they are smaller than public limited companies. I don't know a lot of them in Trinidad and Tobago, but one for sure is going to be the University of the Southern Caribbean. So they are, it's a university, but also they are like a Christian organization. So they are more private than public. So in other words, if any of you, if you ever wanted to become a shareholder of that tertiary level institution, you would have to either become like them and, you know, behave in a particular manner and they would know whether or not eventually if you qualify. So it's more like based on community and stuff, people would decide or even what's the word I'm looking for? Recommend persons for shareholders, which is part holders. Okay. The next thing is what's the next thing? On the with the public limited companies, as the name implies, it's public. So those companies are usually the largest ever, most of them, because their limit or the maximum number of shareholders would be, what is it again? Seven. Okay. And they have no maximum. So a public limited company can have hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, even millions of owners, shareholders. Um, an example is Facebook, Amazon, Google. All of them are public limited companies. They are huge, they are humongous, and that is why they tend to make billions and trillions of dollars because they have so many shareholders, so much more capital, so much more access to funds than other businesses. So they can grow and become these massive companies. And yes, their shares are sold on the stock exchange, which means any one of us, if we or when in some cases, once you have money, you can decide, I want to invest and become a part owner, also known as a shareholder, in Facebook or whichever company, YouTube. It doesn't even have to be those international companies. It could be local because we have Macy's as one. They are public. All banks or most banks in Trinidad and Tobago are public. So First Citizens, Scotia, Royal, the cement company, Trinidad and Tobago Cement Company. So it could be local, it could be abroad, it could be both. But normally you would need like a broker, just mentioning that to you all. But anybody could become a shareholder in public limited companies because their shares are sold publicly. Hence, they must publish their financials. So in other words, their income statement, their balance sheet, their cash flow, cash, what do you call it? Cash, all their final accounts, they need to make those things publicly available so that people or potential investors, meaning potential owners, also known as shareholders, um, they can review and analyze and make an informed decision on um whether or not they should invest their money or not. Okay, because there is always risk with these type of things, but the risk could pay off if you choose the right company. Okay, so again, if you have any questions, if you have any questions, feel free to ask your questions. If you don't have questions, I believe you are taking your screenshots and stuff, okay? I will scroll down and continue. If you have questions, feel free to ask them or send them via the chat. Part D, explain one advantage and one disadvantage to the society in a mixed economy when compared with the society in a free enterprise capitalist economy. Okay. Uh, just so okay. So scrolling down here, an advantage. Okay, before we even go into the advantage, they said mixed economy. So Trinidad and Tobago is an example of a mixed economy, right? Um, in this country, we have both the private public sector. So any country that has private business owners, which means there's a private sector and government own and run institutions, organizations, ministries, and stuff like that, which has public, it has both of them would be a mixed economy. Okay. And then the free enterprise capitalist, that is normally a country, normally it's almost 100% or sometimes 100% business owned and run or privately owned and run. So those countries that would be considered like a free enterprise means there tend to be little or absolutely no government. The country is normally run by private, well, citizens who have businesses and they provide goods and services. Okay, so in a mixed economy, The government provides essential services such as healthcare, education, infrastructure that may not be profitable but are beneficial to society. Unlike in a purely capitalist system where only driven um, services exist. Sorry. So what I was going to say before I move on to the disadvantage, yes, so since we live, or most of us, or all of us live in Trinidad and Tobago, that is why we can attend public and private schools at sometimes. So any of you who have been or still is in a government public school, like whether it's secondary and stuff like that. That is an example of a education offered by the government. So that's why it's considered free. And I said considered it. I mean, in a way, it is free. I normally like to say it like this, right? Now that I am an adult, okay, and probably you all might see it like that as well one day, I don't know. But when I was in high school or attending school like you all and stuff, I used to think for real this thing was really free. However, when I started working and started to pay taxes, I was like, well, it wasn't really free, because whoever paying taxes paying for these services. So in a way, it's indirect. Okay. Yeah. Um, But the good thing with a mixed economy is that people who cannot afford or cannot always afford certain goods and services um, can utilize the public sector, which is free to a great extent or cheap in some cases. Um, yeah. But if it is, we were living in a capitalist system, that would have been a lot of people will have suffered because in a capitalist system, you need to have money to survive because you have to pay for literally everything. You have to pay for water, for electricity, and it wouldn't even be as cheap as it tends to be in Trinidad and Tobago because the government will normally provide subsidies, which is like a form of grant and stuff like that for businesses. But it would have been more costly. Not only that, you have to pay for education, you have to pay for healthcare. Those things are cheap. So, yeah, people who are either in the poor classes, lower class, lower class, which is the poorest of the poor, upper lower class, which is poor but not extremely poor, and then working class people. I don't know, you may not know much about this, but um nowadays, not all that, but nowadays, a number of working class people are also categorized as poor. And that is because the cost of living has increased, right? Also known as the standard of living. So things are more costly, and someone now who earns 4,000, 4,500, even 5,000 a month is not a lot of money. Now, it may be decent for someone who doesn't have to pay rent and stuff like that, and they live in with their parents, yeah. But the moment you start to pay a lot of expenses, and if it is the individual decides, okay, I want a family, well, that money not going to do much. So that's why I said even the working class, a lot of them even struggle too. Anyways, going to the disadvantage. Government involvement in businesses may lead to bureaucracy and inefficiency, slowing down decision making. Uh, what's just yeah, and reducing innovation compared to a capitalist system where competition drives efficiency. So now you all are younger than I am for sure, right? But I must tell you all, whether you know it now or not as yet, Yeah, of course, what the government provides helps a lot of people, but they tend to, um, based on the fact that, um, let's say for instance, right, I used to work in a public government school years ago, literally over a decade ago now. Time flies, you know. And what happened is when I was working there, the the typical thing that people do in the public sector, some workers will, well, some teachers will come to school late. Some of the office staff, they would be liming and talking and, they could work however slow they want and because they do not have a direct boss. Now they do have like supervisors in a way, such as like the vice principals and the principal. But I have seen it with my own eyes, even when the principal and the vice principal um pull in teachers or any staff, office staff that will misbehave it into their offices. Hmm, they would try to discipline them and talk to them about their behavior. And these people tend to still do the same thing over and over because they know the principal is not really their boss, as in the boss who owns the school, who made the school, who money was invested. None of that occurred. Hence, they could do whatever they want pretty much. But in the public sector now, when an individual such as I or any of you, if you ever intend to have your own business, right? When individual people invest their time and money into a business to grow their business, and then they hire teachers. I've seen this too because I've worked in three private institutions after the public school. I remember one of them, it was a private high school in Port of Spain. And a teacher, I don't know exactly what happened, but apparently this teacher either wanted to leave because she was tired or something, and she made up an excuse and told the boss that she wanted to leave and had students coming to class and stuff like that. And what happened was, I don't know the whole story, but all I could tell you all, the boss disciplined her in a way that she had to resume work immediately. So because with a private boss in a private sector, the possibility of being terminated or losing a job is much higher. So people tend to behave a little bit more professionally because they don't get away with stuff as easily as in the public sector. Okay. So yeah, with the public sector, because of the hierarchy, that's the bureaucracy stuff, meaning the government is really the boss in a way, but they would appoint different ministers in each ministry. So after the government, whoever is prime minister in the Ministry of Education, the Minister of Education will be like the second level boss. Then there's a minister in the Ministry of Education. And then there are like these district, what do they call them? I can't remember what they call them. And it's been a while. I've been, as I said, it's been over a decade I've been in public school systems. So I can't remember everything from there, but they call them something. They are these district supervisors who will visit public schools and stuff. Supervisor three, I think they call them. But yeah, again, these people are not the original bosses. So whatever they say, they can try their best and try to discipline whoever is giving problem in the public sector. But these people again know they wouldn't get fired easily, so they do as they wish. And that's why also in the public sector, you can apply for stuff. I have had the experience where I had documents lost. Carelessness. They take weeks and sometimes months to process stuff. It is so inefficient. Time being wasted and also resources at times. But again, with the capitalist system, um, because let's say for example, right? I like to talk about TSCT, which I think, I don't know if any of you were born, probably not, when TSCT was still a thing. I mean, it still exists today, but it's no longer called TSCT, it's called Be Mobile. But when I was younger, it was never known as Be Mobile, it was known as TSCT. So when TSCT started over 20 years back, um, they were the only telecommunication services company in Trinidad and Tobago. So if you needed like phone services, it's TSCT. Hence, they were a monopoly. A monopoly is when there is only one company or one business operating in an industry. So they could have provided poor services if they wanted. And at the same time, because they have no competition, which means no other business was providing the same service or similar to them, they can charge whatever price they want. And then Digicel became a thing years later. That's around the time when TSCT became known as Mobile. Now, it went from being a monopoly to an oligopoly, right? So because there are at least two, I think more and more are joining the industry, but at least two major giants providing telecommunication services, internet services as well now, and some other services. They are now each other's competition, right? So people now have an option where they can choose B-Mobile over Digital, Digital over B-Mobile, depending on whose services they prefer or who paying attention to the price of the services being offered and stuff like that. So that occurs in capitalist system because now when there are multiple businesses or two or more businesses offering the same products or very similar, um, the of course each of them or all of them wants to get the higher market share. When I say market share, I mean more customers, right? So they have to try and improve their services, make better bundle offers, improve their customer service, all that stuff. So that's where the competition comes in, which reduces inefficiency and increases efficiency because better quality, less time being wasted a lot of times, and well, resources are not going to be wasted as much as in the public sector. So again, if you have questions about anything, let me know. Make sure and ask your questions if